Brits like to think of ourselves as a hard-working nation of ambitious, industrious grafters. Rain or shine, usually the former, of course, we pull ourselves up by the bootstraps and we get the job done. But lately, and this has been going on for a few years, an infectious disease has rippled through our workforce. Not COVID, I would call it work-shy wastrel disease, and apparently highly contagious. Firstly, we've been walloped by endless strikes and walkouts all year, and they're the workers who are still working. Hundreds of thousands of people just gave up during COVID and never went back. Many more are still glued to their kitchen tables, working from home. Well, 3 years on from the pandemic, a whopping 44% of workers still spend at least part of the week at home. Half of the civil service and machinery of the government itself no longer bothers going to the office. In some government departments, 71% of staff are running the country from their sofas, more concerned with the capacity of their fridge than the bus. And Dave Penman, the union boss charged with whipping them into shape, responded by, well, whining about being called names.
Now, having been told that you're lazy, woke, inefficient, Remainer, activist, snowflake, you're also now apparently a Machiavellian genius, able to unseat ministers and undermine the settled will of government. I don't know about you, Conference, but I've had enough of this. At some point, we have to say enough is enough.
Would have been a full audience if they'd all come into work. Well, today, the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, in her latest attention-seeking broadside, said that Brits are forgetting how to work for ourselves and we need homegrown fruit pickers and lorry drivers to control immigration. And to my astonishment, I found myself nodding with Miss Braverman for the first time, possibly ever. On this, she may well have a good point. Well, now Labour's Sir Keir Starmer, who might also be the next Prime Minister, says he'll enshrine in law the right to work from home and ban bosses, I love this bit, from sending emails and texts outside of working hours. I keep reading that jobs are under threat from the galloping rise of artificial intelligence, amongst many other things. But I also read that the fastest growing type of small business in the US is content creator, and that 50 million people worldwide now say their occupation is influencer. Well, that means they photograph their avocados for a living and pay the bills by not paying the bills and living with their parents until they're 45. Well, the good news is there is a cure for work-shy wastrel disease, and Dr. Morgan's prescription is this. Put down the baguettes, rediscover the lost art of wearing trousers, and get your lazy, snivelling backsides back to work. Well, on that tender, inclusive note, I'm joined by the General Secretary of the FDA Union, Dave Penman, the businessman and founder of Pimlico Plumbers, Charlie Mullins, and Talk TV's political editor, Kate McCann. In case you're wondering why the backdrop is not our normal, glowing, colourful graphic screens, we've got what's called a technical hitch in the business. So there's a kind of funereal. It looks so bad, it almost looks like GB News. I can only apologise to my viewers for this temporary hitch, which hopefully we will resolve, but it sort of adds the right kind of somberness, I think, to this debate. So, all right, Dave Penman. Here's my problem with what you said. What if one of your workers just happens to be a lazy, woke, inefficient Remainer snowflake?
Well, it's not been my experience of that.
But what if they are? Serious question.
Well, then, like any business or any industry, you would deal with people who are not performing well. We have no problem with that in dealing with performance. The problem is ministers are using this as an issue just to kind of bash the civil service. They're not basing it on any facts around whether people who work in hybrid environments, where sometimes at home and sometimes at work, are any less productive or more productive. They're just doing it to kind of trot out an attack on the civil service.
Why are so many civil servants just stuck at
home?
Well,
it's not just civil servants. It's
no, I know that, but why are so many of your workers working from home?
So, because, I mean, some people were doing it before the pandemic. The pandemic, I think, in many industries accelerated that move. If you look before the pandemic, actually about 17% of the private sector were working at some point at home. That's now...
But this can't be right for a country trying to compete on the global stage with China, America and India. I mean, if our work ethic is basically get up, go to your sofa, watch a bit of daytime telly, which is actually quite riveting at the moment. If it's that, and then you do a bit of work and you con your bosses, you're doing a full shift, I mean...
If it was that, you'd be right, but it's not that. And also,
How do you know what they're doing?
Because they're producing, if not the same, then more. They're working more hours because they're not commuting anymore. It works for them, it works for employers. Why would private sector organisations, when it's the bottom line, one of the biggest sectors where this is working is the finance sector. Now, you're telling me those big banks and international finances houses don't care about the bottom line.
All right.
Yet their workers, in many cases, in bigger proportions, working.
OK, I'm going to come to Charlie about the work part of this in a moment, but just on the bullying aspect, the Dominic Raab thing, which blew up this whole idea of how people should be treated in the workplace. When I went through all the stuff on Raab, I got no truck with Raab. I think he was pretty hopeless in many ways. But when I looked for the smoking gun of what he was supposed to have done to these poor civil servants, I didn't really find one. Was I missing something? I mean, is raising your voice in the workplace now banned? Is holding people that work for you to, quite firm account and being heavily critical of what you think is shoddy work, are any of those things tolerated anymore? Or is that all off limits?
Of course they are, but that's not what the report found. The report found that...
What was he doing, though?
He abused his power, he had humiliated people.
But what was he doing? What does that mean, though? What was he doing?
Because how he treated them, how he talked to them.
Give me an example. Treat me like he was treating somebody.
Well, the report didn't give those kind of level of detail.
I know.
But what
so nobody knows.
That's because they didn't want to identify people. It came up with conclusions. This was an independent...
But do you know?
Hold on.
Do you know, though?
Do
you know what he was doing?
I witnessed...
so give me a bit of the Raab treatment.
So...
I'm serious.
Well, I wouldn't want to humiliate you. I wouldn't want to...
I don't mind. You wouldn't humiliate me.
I wouldn't want...
Short of mentioning my football team's performance yesterday, you cannot humiliate me.
Yeah, but humiliating someone at work, which is what he was found to have done, targeting individuals, which is what he was found to have done. Remember, this was an independent KC who had investigated. This wasn't some woke HR investigation.
Well, we don't know because we weren't told what was going on. Charlie, there are two issues here. One is how people get treated in the workplace. But the bigger one, I think, for you with your view on this is this thing about work from home. It seems to me that Brits are rushing to either abandon work or work from home, or in massive numbers go on to state benefits and just avoid doing any work at all. You put all this together, and the impression that we're giving to other countries is that basically we've become work shy.
And that's exactly true. Exactly true. What you said, Dave, about 70% of the private sector working from home, them figures are not right, mate.
I never said 70%.
What did you say then?
I said 22% of the private sector, but in some sectors during COVID it was up to 70%.
Yeah, well, I mean that's rubbish anyhow. But the private sector have to go to work. They've got no choice. But obviously the public sector, they're being paid by us, the taxpayer. Are we happy with what is it? 300,000 civil servants? Not 300, 30,000 civil servants working from home. 60,000 civil servants. Over 30,000 working from home. Taxpayers paying for it. It's not working. It's 2 years after COVID and they're still at home. There's no reason, no excuse whatsoever. All the offices are half empty. They're paying for lighting, they're paying for security. It's just not working. I mean, they're taking the piss, aren't they?
So the biggest sector where home working is prevalent is the finance sector, in much greater numbers than it is in the public sector. So if that was the case, if this doesn't work, if people who are only in it to make money found that people were work shy and they were at the fridge all the time, why would they continue to do it? They save money because they reduce their office costs. Their staff like it because they get greater flexibility.
Of course the staff like it.
And they still make money. So
okay, tell me this, and if it's...
All right, hang on.
Let me just say
Let me bring the very patient lady waiting at the end of the day.
It takes 1 hour for the civil servants to answer a phone. How can it be working?
All right, let me bring in Kate. So, Kate, I mean, one of the things that made me laugh most was this Keir Starmer initiative, that moving to a place where no boss can contact their staff after a certain time of the evening. I mean, I've spent my entire career being bothered at all times of day and night by bosses, and I just wouldn't cross my mind to complain about that. If you don't like being bothered, do a job which doesn't require you to be bothered.
Yeah, and it's difficult to see how that would work in politics, for example, when most politicians are expected to be on their brief 24 hours a day or whenever they are awake. I put this to the Labour Party at the weekend, actually, and they did admit that it would probably end up being a code of conduct. It would probably only apply to certain types of jobs. It will not apply across the board because it's not feasible. But this whole conversation is a fascinating one. What Labour's trying to get at is this idea that social media, that artificial intelligence is changing the way that we work, and we need to protect people from those changes. But everything has a knock-on effect. If you don't go into work, for example, the number of dry cleaners near offices, the number of sandwich shops near offices, the number of coffee bars go out of business. Those people's jobs are impacted. There is a knock-on effect.
Yes,
all of
exactly
these decisions and changes.
Newspaper sales are down in all the areas where work from home has just carried on because people aren't coming in and spending the kind of money they would on newspapers, provisions, sandwich bars, all that kind of
And they're
stuff.
spending in a different way. They're spending on online deliveries, which means that parcel companies, therefore, are needed far more. But it also means that Royal Mail can't cope, and we need to change the way that Royal Mail is working. It's a huge societal change, and I think there are some valid points to all of these arguments. But everything will have an impact on lots of other things.
And when Suella
not just in
Braverman says,
isolation.
I just think more British people should be taking the jobs that we're currently farming out, literally, to foreign workers, I think she's got a point, hasn't she? Let's hear what she said.
We need to get overall immigration numbers down. And we mustn't forget how to do things for ourselves. There is no good reason why we can't train up enough truck drivers, butchers, fruit pickers, builders, or welders.
You see, I think that is an election boosting attitude to work. I think a lot of people will think she's got a point. They're also going to think we have all this obsessive interest in the small boats part of the immigration debate, and it's legitimate. We shouldn't have this number of illegal people coming in the way they are. But net migration may get over 1 million. I was reading at the weekend, 1 million people coming in. Now, that shows that this country has a great heart to people from Ukraine, Afghanistan, Syria, wherever it may be. But it's not sustainable, is it? Okay, I mean, is that sustainable politically for the Conservative Party, who promised to get these numbers down to have 1 million figure? But is it sustainable for the country?
Well, clearly it's not sustainable for the Conservative Party. You've seen a succession of very senior Conservatives standing on a stage today essentially telling their Prime Minister that it's not working for them, which is something you generally see when a government loses an election, not in the 18 months before they try and win one, which tells you a lot about the state of politics. I think if you try and unpack, though, what Suella Braverman is saying about work, it gets very interesting. The unemployment rate in this country is incredibly low.
But the number of people on benefits is now millions and millions and millions,
lots
right?
of those people have been out of work for a very long time. It's a very difficult problem to solve because those people may be disabled, they may have mental health problems.
Have we become an easy touch for people gaming the system?
But take it further. OK, you're right. There are lots of people on long-term unemployment. Very hard problem to solve, takes a lot of money, takes a lot of time, isn't quick. Look at the number of people who are coming in. Yes, net migration may hit 1 million, but lots of those have come from Hong Kong. They've come from places like Ukraine. They're people that we've welcomed in, but they're also people who've been on shortage occupation lists because we don't have enough people trained in certain types of work to be able to work in this country. Earlier on today, I was speaking to a fruit farmer in Angus. He needs 4,000 people to be able to get his strawberry crops onto the market every single 6 months. There are only 4,000 people unemployed in his particular area, and most of them are not capable of doing those jobs, which is why, in his view, he has to get people from abroad to do them.